The dorsal column medial lemniscus, often referred to as the DCML, is a sensory pathway that conveys sensation of vibration, proprioception, kinesthesia, and fine discriminative touch. It is an ascending tract, meaning that it carries sensory information from the peripheral nervous system, usually the skin and joints, to the central nervous system, specifically the somatosensory cortex within the cerebrum. The DCML pathway begins when sensation is detected in the skin by specialized receptor cells known as cutaneous receptors. From here, the pathway continues through nerves, that specifically dendrites of the unipolar first-order neurons, towards the spinal cord. At this point, I'd like to go over some anatomy of the spinal cord and define the dorsal column. This is the dorsal portion of the spinal cord seen here. It is divided into two regions, which I denoted in pink and turquoise. The turquoise section represents the fasciculus cuneatus, which relates to sensation in the upper body, while the pink represents the fasciculus gracilis, which corresponds to sensation originating in the lower body. Okay. The signal continues to the cell body of the first order neuron in the dorsal root ganglion, seen here. From here, we continue to the axon of the first order neuron as it enters the spinal cord through the dorsal horn. Here it ascends to the medulla through either the fasciculus cuneatus or the fasciculus gracilis, depending on the part of the body that is experiencing sensation. In the example I have illustrated here, we are going through the fasciculus cuneatus, meaning the sensation comes from the upper body. Okay, once we're in the medulla, the first order neuron axon synapses on the cell body of the second order, either in the nucleus gracilis or the nucleus cuneatus. Much like the fasciculi within the dorsal column, these nuclei depend on which portion of the body is involved. Again, we're going through the nucleus cuneatus since the upper body is involved. Okay, the axon of the second order neuron crosses the midline or decussates in the medulla and continues through the brainstem contralaterally through the medial lemniscus, which can be seen here in the pons and here in the midbrain. And then it ascends up to the thalamus. Once in the thalamus, the second order neuron axon synapses on the cell body of the third order neuron within thalamus right here. Okay, at this point, the axon of the third neuron ascends to the primary somatosensory cortex, where it synapses on parietal lobe neurons right here. And that is a basic overview of the DCML. Okay, now let's talk about the spinothalamic tracts. Much like the DCML, the spinothalamic tracts are ascending pathways. There are two major pathways related to the spinothalamic tract, the anterior and lateral spinothalamic tracts. The anterior spinothalamic tract deals with crude touch, while the lateral is involved with pain and temperature. Today we will focus primarily on the lateral spinothalamic tract. Much like the DCML yet again, the lateral spinothalamic pathway is a 3-neuron system beginning with receptor cells in the skin. The nerve endings here are nociceptors, which are specifically designed to detect pain. Sensation travels through first order neuron dendrites to the cell body of the first order neuron in the spinal dorsal root ganglion. The first order axons enter the spinal cord and synapse on the cell body of the second order neuron in the dorsal horn here. Okay, as we continue, the axons of the second order neuron decustate or cross over at the midline of the spinal cord. These right here. From here, the second order neurons ascend contralaterally through the spinothalamic tract, through the brainstem. Eventually, the anterior and lateral spinothalamic tracts merge, and we get to the thalamus, where the second order axon synapses with the third order neuron cell in the VPL of the thalamus. Okay, and axons of the third order neuron continue to carry the sensory information to the parietal lobe, as well as the anterior cingulate and the insula.